We're going to get started with the discussion. I'm going to introduce tonight's speakers. I'll go from your left to right. Julian Kopf is the co-founder and COO of Bug Eater Foods. Julianne graduated with a master's in food science and technology from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. She's a leading innovator in the insect food industry and has worked as a lab tech in the UNL Food Processing Center. One of her main projects was assisting with research on cricket protein extraction. Julianne is the industry administrator for the North American Coalition for Insect Agriculture. So welcome, Julianne. Kelly Sturek is also a co-founder and CEO of Bug Eater Foods. Kelly studied business at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where he excelled in entrepreneurial studies. He has worked for his parents' growing IT business in Las Vegas and as a business development intern at Nebraska Center for Excellence in Electronics. Currently, Kelly runs business development, sales, marketing, team leading, and fundraising. His focus in innovation takes him to many different fields of study, whether it's technology or food science. Dr. Jody Green. Jody is an urban entomologist with UNL Extension. She specializes in pets with 6 legs or more that bug people, including bed bugs, ants, cockroaches, termites, centipedes, ticks, and spiders. Jody works in the community delivering insect-related information through Twitter, newsletters, television, radio, presentations, workshops, and podcasts. In her spare time, she attends cool events like this. So though no time is bug-free, all times are fun. She's got a great Twitter feed. You should follow Jody Bugs Me UNL. Did I get that right, Jody? Yeah. It's a great Twitter feed. This is the second time that I've watched the film. And I'm kind of surprised that in a 73-minute documentary how many questions are kind of packed in there. There's, of course, culinary questions, cultural questions. There's questions of environmental questions, globalism, economics. I think a good place to start would just be, each of you have seen the film before, like your kind of initial reactions, and then maybe like where the documentary, where your work and research overlaps with the documentary. We'll start with you, Julianne.
So I'm trying to put the insects into foods that we already eat. So in the way they portray the insects, they might not like me. We're trying to kind of get the Western society to look at insects in general, because right now most people will not go ahead and just pop ants or crickets in their mouth. We hope one day that's the best way, but right now it's not. So my goal as a food scientist and at Bug Eater Foods is to kind of make foods that people want to eat. It may be because it has insects in it, but it may also be because it's a healthier option. So the main take on the movie would be, yes, the biodiversity and the insects, eating different types of insects is great, but it does not work for everybody, especially with the growing population.
Yeah, I think biodiversity, especially in our diets, is very important. If you are missing certain nutrients, you will be lacking in some other form. And I think insects are a great way. They're very packed with nutrition. As they kind of said when they were in Africa, it's not only the protein, it was actually the zinc that people were missing in their diets, and that's why they're eating insects. And I think that's a great way to put insects into people's minds and be like, well, they're more than just protein. And yeah, they are sustainable and they are these things too, but we should actually look at nutrition and taste as well. And I think those are important questions to bring up, because if we do industrialize insects as food, we have to think about those questions. So I'm all for raising questions and trying to figure it out on our own. I do know this movie is a little bit old, in terms of how things have been moving. The EU is actually approving most insects now. Some of the largest farms are in the Netherlands, and the US has gotten a little bit more into where we're actually going to go in terms of regulation. So, but yeah.
For me, I think anytime there's any education or awareness for any insects, it's good. I've eaten insects. I love what you guys do. I do agree with, I guess I saw both sides of, Chef Ben, because I felt like he was very sensitive to the communities he went to, and so that, that reached out to me. And also with Josh, because although right now, I guess, eating insects in arthropods are a novelty, it would be great if it was something that could sustain communities and help people, and I think that's what your company's doing. So for me, I think any education, any exposure of insects to me is good, and so I really liked I like the film for that reason.
I already have a
Go ahead,
question.
yeah.
I come from a conventional farming background from the Midwest, and so my question is, as you look forward to the horizon of mainstream production, what's the most horrific form of regulation that you would see coming down the pike? Because food production is highly regulated in this country.
Yeah, so I think so far it sounds like the FDA is gonna take the reins maybe someday on doing insects, and that's actually pretty good because it's classified as food. So pretty much we already adhere to standards of selling it as a food product. So, once those regulations pass, it's just checking the boxes.
Well, but you also have,
Touch on the farming aspect of it. If
yeah,
that's-
exactly, the production aspect of it.
Yes. So kind of the timeline of how insects are becoming actual livestock in the U.S. is think about what our reptiles been eating, those farms. And what those farmers are doing are pretty much taking their farms and turn it into a food safety or a food regulated. So pretty much they're just upping their codes of regulation, making it safe. One of the biggest farms is in Canada, and they actually go beyond safety and wear kind of hazmat suits just to make sure it's no outside diseases or species are coming in, as well as there's also every time, just like any other animal production, they're always testing for bacteria, pathogens, as well as they're even going as far as kind of regulating their food. Each farm kind of has their own specific grains or recipe for their feed to kind of give it a different flavor or a different nutritional profile. So the regulation's not quite there yet, and it definitely is going to change once it kind of hits home. But I have a feeling it's going to really focus on kind of following what the European regulation's going to be.
And I think people don't notice too, whenever there are insects offered as food, these are food grade crickets. It's regulated and it's food grade. So we're not just grabbing crickets from the backyard.
There's no such thing as free range crickets right now.
Right. So.
Got a question right here in the front row.
So this relates very much to what you were just talking about, and I'm glad that you have the background you have where you're dealing with insects as pests as well as the whole range. When we're not talking about U.S. production and regulated environments and the like, I was trying to wrap my head around why things like dung beetles, when they were eaten in the cultural way that it was shown, are not a problem, have not been traditionally a problem for the people eating them pathogen-wise and the like. And then besides that, if I can have a twofer, the stuff on the popcorn was delicious. And I'm just curious, it seems like it tastes like there are seasonings in that as well. How much that we were tasting was really just from the animals, and how much of it was more from the
So
seasonings?
all the really dark brown was all cricket. We just add a little bit of paprika and garlic just to kind of give it an extra flavor. But most of that flavor was cricket itself.
You liked it? That's good. And so was it about the safety of eating dung beetles? So a lot of times, when things are cooked, a lot of the venom or toxic substances, if there were any, would be denatured and it wouldn't be a problem. But if you can see that what did they call it, depooping? If they said
yeah.
deterred.
Yeah.
If they said if one of the big companies, they could come in there and deter things really right away. So I think that's why they take out that excrement that's out there and they squeeze that out. No, and I don't think that what they're eating is a problem. So after things are cooked, it's usually pretty fine. It's fine.
So I hear a lot about crickets, but are you looking at any other insects?
Yeah. So as a business standpoint, crickets is the cheapest option right now for us to get it on the market. There already is the infrastructure to actually find affordable crickets to put into food. The next big insect, I think, will be mealworms, just because they're, again, fast growing. They have a really unique flavor profile that kind of acts like tofu, where it kind of gets onto other flavors. As well as there's always already farmers, huge amounts of kind of a marketplace going on trying to build that industry. And then the next one, I think probably black soldier fly larva. That hasn't been in the actual food industry yet, but it has been approved for salmon feed, which is it's the first insect to be approved for livestock in the U.S. A black soldier fly larva. So it's the larva of a really creepy looking fly.
Yeah,
If you
they're
want to
really
see them, they actually have a exhibit at the zoo in the butterfly pavilion. They're really cool, and I usually say that about most insects, but they're really cool because you can have them like decompose different things, and then the larvae like break down different things, and it pupates, and you can have this cycle all in just one container. And so I don't know, they're really cool to
Yeah,
have
there was a
around.
company doing that where they were breaking down materials
Right, yeah,
with
so you
black
can
soldier fly.
pretty much have a colony breaking down things, and when they showed like the soldier fly fat,
Yeah.
Yeah,
very well rounded.
You know, I've heard of this one insect called cochineal. It's been used as some sort of dye,
Yeah.
and it's worth about 30 euros, which is the same amount as 1 exact gram of gold. So instead of saying there's gold in the hills, they say there's cochineal in them hills.
Yeah, so that's a scale insect, and yeah, there's red dye, and for a long time that's what they used to make a red dye, Jack.
So that is actually one of the only natural red food coloring the food industry can use. There was a big deal when they actually found out, like when people found out, oh my goodness, this red dye is coming from an insect. I think Kelly could tell that.
yeah.
Starbucks story.
Starbucks was making like the red velvet latte or something, and they were using that. And people found out that the red came from insects, and they got in a big hubbub about it. Starbucks changed the formula and started using artificial red food coloring, which causes cancer. So now, in hindsight, what would you rather have? So
I think he's up there.
Has there been discussion about culinary names for arthropods, insects?
yeah, there's a few people in New York that are really making some strides in that area. Brooklyn Bugs is kind of a resource you can look at. There's a restaurant called Black Ant in New York that has been serving, what are they called? Escuata tacos. So it's the actual grasshoppers and crickets seasoned and made into tacos. And it's a regular menu item there. So it's definitely coming into, you're seeing a lot more of it now and again. Restaurants in Denver are doing it, some in California. Insects are becoming pretty normal on the coasts, and especially in Europe.
My question is, I mean, I think this is all good. It's all great. There's two pieces here. One is, aren't we looking at possibly just an augmentation? I mean, I believe 100% in sort of where this was going, is that we're going to have enough food, and there's other things that could be coming down, chickpeas and other foods that are whatever, and that there's just going to be an augmentation that there's the protein. So I mean, I'm just making that as a statement. I think that's where we're at. Secondarily, the insects themselves. This country, we have 4 seasons, and so our diversity of the type of bugs that we have, even from the different parts of the country, sure, the South has its species, the Midwest and such, but other countries that have, less than 4 seasons, maybe 2 seasons, India or South America, some of these countries, their diversity of bugs is going to kill us and can beat us to the pulp regarding what they're going to be able to produce and so there's that. What about the process of us then getting crazy and introducing bugs and getting things because they can grow here or we can bring them here? What effect is that going to have on when we start introducing, or somebody, Nestle does some pretty stupid things. They would do this. they would bring in, because the United States has their production, they have the capability, we have water, we have all the things that could support and sustain different bugs, and we would bring in, all of a sudden, we're bringing in different bugs that have no business of being here just because we can produce them. So maybe that goes to where you're at. Isn't there be a worry that we're just going to just change the bug dynamics of the world also
Yeah,
because
that
of
would
this?
depend if it was like being farmed or if they were,
Yeah.
you know, going out into nature, because then that just, you know, brings this huge invasive species. And so that's when, you know, they outcompete the natives. And so that would definitely not be good, but I would see that in more of a farming,
Yeah.
regulated sense.
It's,
if that was
it's
a-
actually one of the things people keep asking us is when is grasshoppers going to be on the menu? And we're like, well, probably not for a while because it's technically the U.S. probably won't pass grasshoppers and locusts being able to farm them for human consumption because they're huge invasive species. Granted, these they're going to be farmed in enclosed areas, but what happens if they get
Yeah.
out? That's why.
Yeah, one tornado and
Crickets are not as invasive and not going to kill our whole crops out. So that's a good way to see it. We aren't planning on bringing a bunch of invasive species, but that's something definitely regulations we're going to have to figure out
Yeah,
before
like
that.
even as pets, you know, like I do a lot of education with students and things like that. I can't have stick insects and plant feeders. Those plant-eating insects are definitely something that's going to be regulated.
yeah.
What's the feed to gain ratio for like crickets and things? And how long does it take them to get from egg to market? And how does that compare to like broiler chickens?
Yeah, so we were looking at farming and kind of that feed ratio. Basically, you need 3 pounds of feed for 4 pounds of feed for 3 pounds of crickets, and that takes about 4 to 6 weeks.
So
from
40,
egg.
43 days roughly. If you go outside, we have a really nice poster kind of seeing the conversions of how much feed versus and water and land versus I think we have poultry, cattle, and whey protein. We don't know it off the top of our heads, but definitely crickets definitely are 98% less feed than cattle.
For that same 1 gram of protein.
I heard about this one famous bug chef called Chef David George Gordon, and I have his cookbook. And the one thing I wish I could do is to get him to sign it. And have you guys heard of him? Or
Yeah.
Yeah, you could actually, he's really nice. You could probably send it to him and he'd sign it and send it back. Yeah. You can go to his website. I'm pretty sure he has his email, his website. You can email him or you can find his address there.
My question, I'm going to take it down to a 12-year-old like child question. What's your favorite bug to eat?
I haven't had too many different types of bugs. I probably can name them on 5 hands. I really like the Tupelinis. I went to an edible insect conference, and it was really fun because this one guy, he just had different bags of different insects. And he's like, oh, try these. I'm like, okay. But the waxworms are pretty good. They kind of halfway taste like pistachios, but
How are they given to you?
sauteed.
Waxworms.
I think it
those-
matters, like how.
Yeah, definitely how you cook
Yeah.
them will change the flavor. I'm not a huge fan of silkworm soup.
It's very texture heavy, which is, especially in like Chinese food, texture is very important, and they like that silkworm texture, but a lot of Westerners probably wouldn't do it. It's like, they'll do like deer tendons in China, and that's like a delicacy, but out here it would be like the weirdest thing for most people, so.
I'm pretty boring. It would probably just be crickets.
Waxworms, that, yeah, pistachio.
Julian and Kelly, the USDA has a brief cameo during the conference scene, and was it a year or two ago you received some funding from the USDA? Could you talk about?
Yeah, it's actually kind of exciting. That man speaking is now the USDA director, I think, and he's actually an entomologist from K-State. So we have been trying to we've talked to him a couple times about regulations, and he's really for the use of edible insects. We, I think in 2015, were given or granted a USDA Phase 1 grant to do research on using insects as a food source and making it into food products. And we received a $100,000 grant to do research. And that was really huge to kind of find out that the government wants people to kind of research this and see the actual usability of it.
Do we have any final thoughts or additional questions? Yes.
I have a cold, so we'll see how this comes out. Since crickets or bugs multiply quickly, what's the quality sustainability of insects in the long term as far as their health benefits? And I guess my comparison is, our food value used to be higher decades ago, or so I've read and understand and believe, compared to the food value we have now, because we've done a lot of things to systematically probably program the flavor out, the nutrition. Where do we see that possibly impacting the bug value also of nutrition?
So I'm not an entomologist or anything, but insects, we usually are getting them from like crickets in general. It's going to be one species you're going to get from that product. And unlike like cows, there's going to be a lot of different actual species. You have your Herefords, you have your milk cows, and but they all are genetically different. Where crickets, for instance, the house cricket is one of the main ones used. They're all genetically same. So that may play a bad part or a good part in the future of what you're kind of saying. But so that's a kind of a way to look at it. Like, they're not animals where they have genetic changes. They're more like fish or like crustaceans.
I think the consensus with some farms and some other places are, what can we do to improve the flavor profile and the nutrition? So there are some farms that have gotten grants to, like, how can we make like a super cricket that has super high omega-3 values? And all the farms are trying to kind of get, what can we make our cricket special into, whether it's flavor or nutrition. So I think the consensus is to make crickets even better than they are right now.
And with the whole bugs, cricket's one of how many insect species are there?
Well, what they were saying up there was like that 1,900 edible insects,
Yeah,
but I
edible.
think anyone who wants to eat any of them, there's. Can you guys hear me? Oh, there are a lot. So, but.
And each insect will have its own unique nutritional value, quality, as well as crickets have been kind of the only one researched and not researched very much, whereas every other animal has been researched to its pinpoint, this is causes this is causing this, this is the quality of it. Some kind of unpublished research has found that crickets may have, or some other insects, have an anti-aging or an antimicrobial effect on some food. Granted, this is preliminary research, so it could be you have to eat a large amount of crickets to actually get this effect.
Yeah, and it depends what they've researched, right? Because
Yeah.
like if they're looking into certain things, I mean, there are a lot of different insects and minerals and vitamins that they're saying that are anti-aging or, you know,
And
illness fighting or
The
you know,
crickets
things like
itself, what's kind of unique about them is their hard exoskeleton, which can be, well, they're finding out is it's made mainly of chitin, and this is a gut function ingredient. So it can help the gut function as well as be a probiotic. That's the word.
And I think we've been eating insects for thousands of years, and when we kind of got into the modern food processing system, insects weren't involved, so they weren't studied. even though we could have done them for hundreds of years. But now it's actually coming back, and we're finding a lot of interesting things. I mean, eating bugs thousands of years ago is actually like the safest form of protein because it didn't try and attack you. And, you know, when the men went off and hunted, they were unsuccessful. But if you could find a termite mound, there you go, you got food.
Another kind of good point off that would be there's an anthropologist who's really kind of done some research and kind of looked at the idea of why isn't the Western society been eating insects, where we see more people at the equator consuming insects, the Africa, Mexico, Asia, and kind of her finding was in the idea of evolution when the Neanderthals went up to Europe and kind of migrated to the U.S., it was too cold for insects, so they had to find another source of meat, which would be like hunting it. So it's kind of an idea is like we had to find some other source, and that's kind of could be where this ick factor is coming from because it's not been in our diet or mindset.
Yeah, my brother traveled to Southeast Asia, and he was like, they have canned grubs. Like, you can go to the grocery store and get canned grubs and street food, and he's like, it's everywhere. Because I asked him for a presentation I did with you. I was like, send me all your pictures. And he's like, you know, I tried this, this, and this. I couldn't bring myself to eat this because it smelled bad. But he's like, it's everywhere, and it's like that's what people live for. So yeah, it is. There is a huge ick factor, and I mean, no one eats anything that I bring to the office because they believe that there's some kind of insect in there. If Jody brings cookies, then probably there's some kind of insect in there. But I mean, no one's really complained. They either don't eat it or they eat it, and it bothers them if they like it. I think, you know.
If they want it, I'll take it.
I know you will, Jack.
I had a question about gut-loading insects. I used to raise reptiles, and I kept crickets and raised crickets. And there was not a lot of real scientific evidence as to like feeding them calcium powder or feeding them certain types of cricket feed, how it was better for your reptiles. And I guess my question was, is there evidence that gut-loading something like a cricket or even a waxworm can actually change the nutritional value behind it? Or like, is anyone writing papers on
Yes,
this? Is there any solid evidence, I guess?
Actual published papers, maybe not, but I've been to different actual conferences, and people are doing this. It is a thing. I know Entomo farms, when they're growing their insects, their last kind of week, they change their diet to having a more of a high protein, high nutritional value, just because it's a little bit cheaper to have that higher quality feed at the end rather than throughout. So that's definitely happening, and they're also trying to find studies. They're doing some studies to see if you're gut loading your insects, how does it affect like chickens or pigs or cattle? So you are 100% right. It does affect the actual nutritional quality and the flavor too. Because I know one farm was feeding them apples at the end, and it kind of had a sweeter taste.
I know McDonald's is actually, sounds like they're spearheading the research on feeding their chickens mealworms and crickets. So
I think we have time for maybe just one more question.
We have two. We just take two quick
Two.
ones. All right,
Yes.
two quick questions. Start here.
I have a question about marketing, because if you can get like insects to sell, and the problem would be is like, how would you make insects sound tasty? Because the grasshopper McNuggets and the McCockroach aren't going to be selling flying off the shelves anytime soon.
yeah, I agree. I think the thing is to make it look normal in its form. You know, we do macaroni, we do rice, we do ramen. Honestly, if we just gave it to you and didn't put any packaging on it, you wouldn't tell. It would look like whole wheat pasta. It would look like whole wheat ramen. But of course, in our marketing, that we do say it has insects, because basically there's two scenarios you could do in terms of marketing and packaging. You could either hide the fact that there's an insect in it, or say there is an insect in it in the front. What's going to have the worst blowback from a consumer standpoint? Probably the fact that you're hiding it. So if we're going to put products on the market, we do say that there is insects in it. And we are proud of that, and we should be.
You know, I heard of this one fast food chain that had this chocolate cricket mint milkshake, and this other one that was a Slim Jim milkshake. And when people tried it and they took it off the menu, people wanted it back, so they put it on there because it became so popular and got like a ton of news fame and stuff like that. I forget what it was called.
Yeah, it was. I forgot the chain, but it was in Oregon. It was a Burger Shack chain in Oregon that they were doing that, and people actually really liked it.
It was kind of funny. The original person who supplied him with the cricket powder, he was had a really high quality kind of product, and it was probably the best in the market. But the company said it's too expensive, and so they switched companies and started getting it from another farm. And it's the insect industry is really tight knit right now. There's not many people out there, so we always hear about all these different drama situations.
It's pretty much like high school.
Well, thank you, Julianne, Kelly, and Jody for being here tonight. Thank you again to UNMC for partnering with us. And please come back.